While I was a teenager, I lived in the SeaTac area. We were about a 45-minute drive from Seattle proper. My town was considered a small town even though it was surrounded by larger cities. One lovely summer day, my friends and I decided to go to a lake to hang out. Only one of us had a license and car. We will call him Dopey. My dad told me to be home by 6. When we had left town, it was only noon, and each of us discussed and agreed to be home by 6. My curfew was the earliest one that day, but it was because my family had plans that night I needed to go back for. So, 6 teenagers pile into Dopey's Gremlin. If you don't know, a Gremlin is a pretty small, gutless car. We headed to the lake for about 5 hours and had a great time. Then it was time to go home. Dopey decides that he needs to go to Seattle first to talk to someone. I remind him that I have to be home in an hour, and he promised to get me home. So I will make sure that happens. He scoffed at that part. We climbed back in his car and headed to Seattle. Not much I could do about that. We get to his friend's house and Dopey tells us to wait in the car. He goes inside and is in there for about half an hour. I'm getting more and more pissed and pretty sure he's there for some sort of drug deal. I start laying on the horn until he comes out. He's super angry about that. I'm sure drug dealers don't like that kind of attention at their home. So we're on the freeway and he's in the right lane doing 45. He's being petty and making sure I'm late enough to get grounded. Speed limit is 60, traffic is moving about 70. I'm seething and he's smirking. I look around and spot a dick truck. You know, the type, giant tires, lights everywhere, rolling coal. I see 3 guys crammed in the cab. They're in their early 20s. Perfect. I catch their eye and start making rude gestures. I flip the bird, I make gestures suggesting that they give one another blowjobs and anything I can do to piss these guys off. It works. Oh boy, does it work. They get right behind us with their giant trucks and start revving the engine and flashlights. Now Dopey is scared that these guys are gonna beat his arse and he doesn't know why. We made the 45-minute drive back in about 20 minutes and I got home on time. The truck stopped following us when we exited the freeway. As I was getting out of the car, I told Dopey that next time I just tell my daddy it was his fault if we were late, because my daddy would not give up on beating his ass like those guys in the truck did. It was a wonderful moment watching his jaw drop when he realized I was the cause of our high-speed chase. Next story. My friend Bruce and I met in middle school and we loved nothing more than to pull pranks on people. We truly were little shits and the people who referred to us as gremlins were far too kind. Throughout the years, the bullshit we pulled on other people got us into a lot of trouble and nearly got us kicked out of school for trespassing. We would stay after school most days for most of the year. We would rearrange the carts of the custodians and any teacher's desk we had access to. The goal of this was to either make people think they were going crazy or the place was haunted. When we got caught, they were not happy. We took that as meaning the prank was successful. Nearly getting kicked out of school was a bit of a wake-up call. Rather than stopping, we just started to make each other the target of the prank since we could take a joke. Although we didn't have any rules or limits, in my mind he crossed the line when he sent me chocolate and flowers to my deeply religious employer. This note insinuated that I was in a gay relationship. In his love note, I was referred to as his furry lighthouse. I think the only thing that saved me from being fired was that I started laughing hysterically when I read the card. Even then, I was given a verbal warning. Not to defend Bruce, but he was aware that I was looking for another job and planning on quitting. My issue was that I wasn't in the best position financially at the time, and missing out on even one paycheck could have really screwed me over. Plus, I definitely wouldn't have gotten a reference from them. Bruce worked at a mom and pop ISP back when they were a common thing. He was working as their only IT guy and was basically on call 24/7. I should note that he didn't know jack shit about computers and bullshitted his way into an easy job. It was a fact he loved to rub in my face. Our group of friends had decided to go to a Chevelle, concert on Friday night. Earlier in the week, Bruce had told us how glad he was that the show hadn't been the previous week because he ended up having to stay late working on a server issue. Bruce didn't realize it, but he had given me an amazing idea on how to really mess with him. One annoying thing about the computer/the internet at the time was the lack of good ways to transfer large files over the internet for free. You pretty much just needed to have access to an FTP server or something similar. The obvious method is just sending your files through email, but anyone who had tried in that era learned pretty quickly that the servers just could not handle large files and would crash. Current servers wisely have default set on the file size limit, but in the early 2000s this was not the case. So on the Friday of the concert, at about 4:30, I sent a 700 megabyte porn video with the subject, "Hey, I found a porn of your mom." Well, good old Bruce showed up about 20 minutes late, grumbling about how much the Exchange server sucks. When I asked him why it crashed, he said that he didn't care and that it just needed a restart to fix. As the good friend I am, I suggested he take a look at his logs, but he said why bother when a reboot fixes it? It doesn't happen that often. And that's when I discovered my friend was an idiot, that he was extremely shit at his job, and that I had a ruin Bruce's day switch. That is, unless he actually took the 5 minutes to look into why the server crashed. I pulled this little trick out every couple months. I knew it took him 20 minutes for him to get home from his job, so I'd crash the server just as he was walking in his door. He'd start getting alerts. Burning on a vacation day? Nope. Out at the movies? See you later, Bruce. Out at an amusement park? I did wait until he was leaving at least. It wasn't all mean. I did help my bro get out of a double date he wasn't looking forward to. It all came to a head that winter. We had gotten a foot of snow that weekend, and if you've ever lived in an apartment, you just know how miserable of a situation the parking lot can be. That said, I stayed in and woke up a few hours earlier than normal to go dig myself out on Monday. The hope is that by then the plows will have cleared spots, so you have somewhere to put the snow. Well, I go out, and who do I find shoveling more snow onto my car? Good old Bruce. He'd been at it for over an hour and had even taken a vacation day so he could afford to sit in a fold-out while he watched me dig out myself. While he sat sipping out of a thermos and watching me do, he'd throw jabs in here and there. He wore me down. I regret to this day that I lost my temper and spilled the beans. After he said something like, "You missed a spot," for the 100th time, I ended up asking him why he never responded to any of the emails I sent him about his mom. When I told him the dates I had sent them / events that were going on, he pieced it together and lost his mind. We may have rolled around with each other in the snow like a couple of magnificent gay bears for a bit, good times. After we calmed down, he asked me why he shouldn't tell the owners of the company about what I had done. Apparently they'd gotten complaints and a customer had even threatened to move to a different email host. I politely informed him that I had found a porno online and the actress resembled his mother. As a concerned friend, I had to send it to him, but as he never responded, I resent it a handful of times. I also told him that if my emails were in fact crashing the server, that all he would have needed to do was check the logs one time to see if it was my email that caused it, which I had even suggested he do at the start. He did end up laughing it off and even helped me dig out my car the rest of the way. That was where we both ended the pranks. We shook on it and figured that if both of us were too miserable to enjoy the other's suffering, that there wasn't much point. Next story. Players, me, 36M, about 26 at the time, boss A and B, my direct bosses where I worked, and the plant manager. I apologize, it may be a bit long. So I was next in line to run my own line when my operator line lead quit. Why do we call that person an operator and not a lead, you ask? I was later told it was purely to help make them feel inferior and work for less pay. The job actually entailed running your own line and crew of 4 or 5 people who would directly report to you. I figured as soon as my operator said he was leaving that I would be asked to replace him. I also knew the last person or two who took this promotion did so without a raise for the first year or two. So when they came and asked me about filling the spot and training my own brand new crew, I said yes. I also told boss A and B at the same time I would gladly do so for 3 months as a trial period. After that, I would expect a $1 per hour raise or more. They both initially said this was reasonable, but that they could not guarantee anything. I then said they could find someone else to take the job. $1 per hour was already nowhere near worth the headache. I sure as hell was not going to do it for free. The very next day, both of them separately came back to me and assured me the plant manager had agreed to my deal. 3 months later, I was one of the top performers out of the 8 of us doing this job. Probably second or third in production. When I asked about my raise, I was told by both bosses they would ask the next day. I was told this every day for a week, then I scheduled a meeting with the plant manager. He informed me my numbers were not satisfactory and that to deserve a raise I had to outperform everyone. I told him that was not the deal we had agreed to and that at the end of the week, if I was not being paid to be an operator, I wouldn't do the job. I would go back to the job I was titled for or they could fire me. 3 days later, I did just that. I walked in and helped set up part of the line I used to be responsible for and left the rest to just sit there. An hour later, all hell broke loose. Boss A asked what I was doing, so I explained. He simply buried his face in his hands and walked off. Boss B tried to tell me I was not going about this the right way and began running the line himself. 1 hour later, the plant manager arrives and begins screaming at me. His first line after a group of curse words that made no sense was, "I told you that you're not an operator." To which I spoke up and agreed. I also reminded him that he just said this in front of about 5 people. He probably spent another 15 minutes screaming and cursing at me while I just laughed. All I said was I'm not an operator and will not do the job anymore. Do what you need to do. Fallout. They promoted the next guy below me to the operator spot and gave him a 25-cent raise. He had zero experience doing the job and had only survived before because I was training him and helping him. I became his blend line guy, which was basically the top person not in charge on the line. When I ran the line before, we made out about 15,000 pounds a day in production with about 85% uptime. The next 3 months, we produced about 7,000 pounds a day with maybe 50% uptime. I can only estimate, but Boss B once told me my move may have cost him about $500,000 in production. The amount lost in the machine failure and parts, etc. I can't even begin to guess at. Eventually, I quit and ended up coming back after I heard the PM had been fired. It was still terrible pay, but I got my raise this time immediately and helped them even open up new lines in the other states for a while. For those of you reading, it isn't business savvy to request well below the industry standard. You don't owe companies shit. If the industry standard is $22 an hour, do not request anything less. Go somewhere else if you have to. Not only are you screwing yourself, you're screwing all of your coworkers in the same position. I don't disagree, but it is more to it than always asking for an industry standard. Looking back, I easily should have asked for 15 or 16 at least. The plant is in a place with zero competition in the same area, and it did not have the same types of requirements for a position as many similar jobs in other places. That said, I 100% regret working there for that cheap for as long as I did. Next story. Backstory. Our building and the neighboring building have a small wall between the two, and on either side of the wall we have parking areas. Around 5 cars are parked on our side and 3 on their side, but on their side they also have a coconut tree that grows on the ground of the building. The tree leans over into the parking area of our building, and many a time the coconuts fall and sometimes they hit the cars parked below. We do not have a roof or shed above the car parking area. Even though it's been discussed in the building, it's a separate issue. I won't get into the details of it. It's just that they don't want to spend money for it. Whenever a coconut does fall, the people of the neighboring building always come over to claim the coconut, saying the tree's on our grounds, hence the coconut is ours, and are very rude about it, even though no one in our building bothers with taking the coconuts or wants to do anything with it. The only problem we hold with the coconuts is that they damage our cars quite often, and we've asked the neighboring building to do something about their tree because the tree lies on their grounds and we can't do anything about it. Main story. This time it was my car's turn. It was parked under the tree, and at about 7 in the morning, one of the coconuts fell and hit the windshield of my car, completely destroying it and denting the front hood of the car after bouncing off the windshield. I heard the beeping noise from my car and immediately went to check on it, and lo and behold, I find the people of the neighboring building on their way to take the coconut. Now, I really don't care about the coconut, nor do I want it. I probably would have thrown it anyway. I probably would have thrown it away anyways. But they could have taken the coconut away before I reached, and I would have had no idea what happened to my car and how it happened, let alone explaining it to the people at the insurance. Though thankfully we have CCTVs that would have shown me clearly what happened if I had asked the society to show me the footage. I was extremely pissed off because they didn't have any form of sympathy, and they had the audacity to be rude about it, telling me that the coconut is theirs and they don't care what happened to the car. But an idea brewed in my mind. Since I had CCTV footage of the coconut hitting the car, and the neighboring building loved to scream on the top of their lungs about how the tree is theirs and hence so are the fruits of it. Yes, coconuts are fruits. I just claimed the amount of them, considering the damage was caused by their property. They were pissed off when they sent a letter about the situation, and on learning the fact that they had to pay for the damages caused, a couple of them immediately rushed to my home, essentially shouting at me for why I did it, and I simply said, "You can keep your coconuts all you want. Your coconut broke my car, and now you have to pay for it." The society funds had to dish out about 14,000 rupees, approximately $200, which is a lot in India by the way, and they weren't happy about it at all. Since then, 2 coconuts have fallen from the tree. Thankfully, no cars were hurt those times, and I didn't see anyone try to come and take the coconuts. They had to pay 14,000 rupees for trying to be petty about a 30 rupee coconut. I'd say 10 to 20 coconuts in the past, maybe 3 years, so like 600 rupees worth of coconuts. Kind of off topic, but do coconuts usually fall at night? We were house sitting for some friends in the South Pacific, and they have a large yard with many coconut trees. We would pick up the coconuts to feed the pigs. Every morning there'd be 10 to 12 coconuts on the ground, but during the day only 1 or 2 would fall. Wow, in Denmark, your property line is where your property ends. If your tree extends past that line, everybody's free to grab anything that hangs outside or cut it off entirely. In a previous home, our neighbors had a tree that eventually became so big that the trunk went past our fence. Neighbor refused to remove it or cut it, so we hammered copper nails into our side of the trunk, and they eventually had to remove the entire tree.